Hello, my name's Harold Halfdan, and welcome to Archaeological Minecraft. I'm a former archaeologist who enjoys playing Minecraft and thought it would be fun to combine the two. In today's episode, we'll be returning to something I mentioned in an earlier video. Last year, back when I did my episode on Irish round towers, I mentioned that round towers are found on the west side of Irish monasteries, and that's so often the case that some previously unknown monasteries have been found by searching around known round towers. I said that in some future video, I might build an Irish monastery that's associated with a round tower as a result, and that's exactly what we're doing in today's episode. Now, when I say I'm building a monastery, you might think of monks or conjure up visions of a monastic community where people sat around all day and prayed. And while you would be correct in both cases, monasteries did contain monks, and they did spend their time praying. But what you might not know is how absolutely critical Irish monasteries were, not just to Irish society at that time in the Middle Ages and earlier in history, but also how critical they were to your everyday life even today. What I mean by that is this. You likely take for granted an invention made by Irish monks that you use every single day. You see, while the Irish had mostly converted to Christianity around the time of the end of the Western Roman Empire, they were never conquered by Rome, and as such was never a place where Latin was spoken as the primary language. So any Latin writing or literature had to be learned by Irish monks as a second language, and so to aid in that learning and writing that secondary language, they made a modification to it that hadn't been widely used previously. That invention was to place a blank space between the words and to add punctuation to sentences. Native Romans or Latin speakers didn't put spaces or punctuation in their writing. Every word ran together continuously, and if you were literate, you were expected to understand the language well enough to read it with all the words and sentences running all together. I'm going to pop up an example of what that looked like. This is an example of an inscription from a victory column erected by the Emperor Trajan celebrating his victory over the Dacians in AD 113. You can see the first line reads, Senatus Publius que Romanus, which translates to the Senate and people of Rome. But you can see that it's one big run-on word, as is all the other text in the block. Adding the space for the Irish monks had the same effect that it does for us today when reading, which is to make the text far more readable and more easy to learn and understand. And we have the Irish monks to thank for it. That wasn't the only contribution of Irish monks and monasteries. While the rest of the Western Roman Empire was spinning into decline, because Ireland wasn't part of the Roman Empire, the Irish monasteries continued on, flourished, and became a haven for learning and knowledge. The Irish monks and scribes continued to write, learn, copy manuscripts, and save Roman and Latin literature and ecclesiastical knowledge. They ended up being such a bastion of intellectual knowledge and understanding that when the Emperor Charlemagne, in around AD 800, give or take a few years, wanted to develop his own knowledge and that of his court and empire, he turned to Irish monks to do it. He imported Irish monks and their monastic traditions into his court. Likewise, many of the famous monasteries in the British Isles, such as Iona and Lindisfarne, were founded by Irish monks or based on their Irish monastic traditions. And it wasn't just those specific monasteries that the Irish monastic traditions were felt, but Irish ecclesiastical leaders, in other words, church leaders, dominated the Irish area of Northumbria, where Lindisfarne was located, as well as had influence in other areas such as Canterbury, Sussex, and East Anglia. They helped establish Christianity in the British Isles and Western Europe more generally. Those areas had strong Christian populations prior to the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but many areas reverted to traditional pagan or non-Christian religions after the fall, and so it was the Irish monks and other Irish ecclesiastical leaders who played a critical role reintroducing Christianity into those areas. Another interesting aspect of monasteries I want to delve into is their interconnection with the dynastic kingship and other political relationships in Ireland. When I say kingship, you might think of a single king ruling all of Ireland in a similar manner of what kingship looked like in medieval England or France, but that isn't how kingship worked in Ireland. Ireland had a vast array of kings and high kings holding small, ever-changing kingdoms whose political alliances were, as I said, ever-changing. As such, kings or high kings were always on the lookout to take advantage of any political opportunity that they could get their hands on to give them a leg up over their rivals or further cement their power. That's where monasteries came in. Through supporting a monastery, they could curry favor with the monks and ecclesiastical leaders, who, as discussed previously, had a wide-reaching influence network and could build new networks, be it trade, protection, or financial support networks for those kings. Additionally, by galvanizing support behind a patron saint or monastery, the king could in turn galvanize a central focus for his people. Also, think for a moment about who was doing all the writing of histories and keeping all of the records of events in their annals. It was the monasteries. So it wouldn't be far off to think of them as having the potential to be a king's public relations department. If the king could get the history books to be written fondly of him and his rivals ignored or written poorly about, then that bolstered his power, prestige, and helped his dynasty remain in control. The other advantage in creating strong connections with the monasteries is it's a nice place for the king to retire. While not very common, it happened more than you would think. Sometimes this would occur to more smoothly pass the kingship down to a successor, but it also sometimes occurred if there was a shift of political power and control away from the king, and then they could either face death or retire to a monastery. I personally would choose the monastery. So while I've been blathering on all about the history and importance of monasteries in medieval Irish society and beyond, I've also been recreating the monastery at Kilmacduagh. Kilmacduagh Monastery is near the town of Gort in County Galway on the western coast of Ireland, and is purported to have been originally founded in AD 610 by Saint Colman, son of Dua, and Kilmacduagh means Church of Dua's son. This monastic site contains the tallest round tower in Ireland, and that structure dates to the 10th century AD. It also contains a number of chapels, churches, and an abbey, which was a former cathedral for the diocese, and several other structures. The original monastery was destroyed in a raid in the late 11th century AD, and many of the structures, churches, and chapels on the site date to after that destruction, and thus date to between the 11th century and the 15th centuries, with some of the earlier buildings, like the cathedral, receiving an expansion and a remodel over those centuries. In this reconstruction, I rebuilt 4 of the 7 buildings in this monastic complex, focusing on the ones that were nearest the round tower. The building nearest the round tower is in fact only 15 meters, or in the case of Minecraft, 15 blocks to the east of the round tower, and it's the Kilmacduagh Cathedral. You can see that I left the cathedral incomplete. In fact, in this recreation, I tried to stick to what it looks like today if you would visit the site, and so if the roof had collapsed, then I didn't add it. If a building's walls had partially crumbled, or if there was a hole in the wall, I recreated that as best I could in Minecraft. I put a link in the description below to a website about the monastic site where there's some pretty stellar drone footage. You can see that the whole area around the cathedral and round tower is full of burials and graves, and is in fact a big cemetery. The same could be said for the space within the cathedral itself. If we head out of the cathedral and make our way out to the street, you can see one of the small churches on the site. This is St. Mary's Church and dates to the 13th century. You can see that one side has partially collapsed and is the only structure on the site that's on the far side of the road. If we walk up the street, you can see across the field is another church named St. John's Church, or the Church of St. John the Baptist, and that one dates to the 10th century. Continuing up the narrow roadway, we come to the last building I recreated on the site. This is the Kilmacduagh Gelbhouse. It was built in the 14th century and was the residence for the bishop and was also a seminary, or in other words, a school for priests. Interestingly, this site was a small fortified house where the bishop and others could take shelter in times of strife, and a few guards or a small garrison could be posted on top of the battlements. One thing that's ironic about this recreation, and happened by accident, is that Galway, where Kilmacduagh is located, has a number of megalithic tombs from the Neolithic, as well as a number of tower houses, and purely by happenstance, I happened to build the Kilmacduagh Monastery settlement recreation right next to where I had previously built my tower house recreation, and you can see that off in the distance. As well as I built a number of Neolithic tomb structures, which you can see in the background. Nothing more than happy accidents, but I'll take them. Well, that wraps up this video all about the importance of Irish monasteries in the Middle Ages and my reconstruction of the monastery at Kilmacduagh. I dropped some of the resources I discovered and used while researching this topic in the description, so you can check them out if you want to learn more. I wouldn't mind if you hit the subscribe button, and if you liked the video, please click that like button. That way YouTube knows to recommend this video to others who also might enjoy it. Please also leave me a comment about what you liked or didn't like so I know better how I can focus on creating the content that you most enjoy watching. Thanks, have a good rest of your day, bye for now.